The silence in our house had become a physical presence. It wasn't a peaceful quiet, it was a heavy, suffocating blanket that settled over the beige upholstery and the tastefully bland art on the walls. My wife, Clara, and I had perfected the art of coexistence. We were a well-rehearsed play, hitting our marks with precision. How was your day? Fine. Did you pay the electric bill? It's on the calendar. We slept in the same king-sized bed, a vast, cold continent separating us. I was 42, and I felt 80. My life was a spreadsheet of responsibilities, mortgage payments, quarterly reports, coaching my son Liam's soccer team on Saturdays. I loved Liam with a ferocity that scared me sometimes, but the rest of it felt like I was playing a part written for someone else. The man in the mirror had tired eyes and a smile that never quite reached them. I was comfortable, secure, and utterly, completely numb. The idea didn't come to me in a dramatic flash. It was a slow, insidious whisper that started in the quiet moments. I'd be driving to work, the same route I'd taken for a decade, and I'd wonder, is this all there is? I wasn't unhappy, not in a way I could articulate. I was just empty. I felt like a satellite that had broken from its orbit, drifting silently into the void. And one night, staring at the ceiling while Clara breathed evenly beside me, the thought crystallized: I wanted to test my limits. Not my physical limits. I wasn't about to run a marathon. It was the limits of my own character, my morality, the very foundation of who I thought I was. I had always been the reliable one, the good husband, the devoted father. But was that who I truly was, or just a role I'd become proficient at playing? What lay beneath that placid surface? Was there a man of passion, of risk, of feeling still alive in there, or had he been paved over by years of compromise and routine? I needed to know. I needed to poke the bear of my own soul and see if it would growl. So, I did this. I created a profile on a dating app. It felt absurd, typing in a fake name, Daniel. My real name is Mark. Daniel sounded more adventurous, more interesting. I used a photo from a company retreat a few years back, where I looked tanner and less weary. My bio was a collection of vague half-truths, enjoying life's journey, looking for interesting conversation and new connections. It was sterile, safe. For the first week, it was just a secret game. I'd swipe left and right during my lunch break, a thrill of transgression coursing through me. I wasn't planning on meeting anyone. This was just the test. Could I even operate in this shadow world? The answer was a terrifying yes. Matches came in. Conversations started. They were mostly bland, but the mere act of texting another woman, of crafting a witty reply, felt like flexing a muscle I'd forgotten I had. And then, I matched with Elena. Her profile was different. She wasn't posing in a cocktail dress. She was laughing on a hiking trail, her auburn hair catching the sun, her eyes crinkled with genuine joy. Her bio read: bookworm, trail walker, and seeker of good coffee and great stories. She was 38, a freelance graphic designer, and her first message to me wasn't a, hey. It was, okay, Daniel, enjoying life's journey, is the most terrifyingly vague thing I've ever read. Who are you, really? She called my bluff immediately, and instead of scaring me away, it hooked me. Our conversation was like a tennis match, fast, intelligent, and exhilarating. We talked about everything: the last great book we'd read, our shared disdain for cilantro, the quiet loneliness that can exist in a crowded city. She was sharp, funny, and perceptive. She saw through the cracks in my digital facade. You're married, aren't you? She typed one evening, as I sat in my car outside my own house. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, the moment the test became real. I could lie, and the delicate fantasy would shatter. Or I could tell the truth, and step fully into the abyss. Yes, I typed back, my finger trembling on the send button. There was a long pause. I watched the 3 little dots appear and disappear. Finally, her reply came. I figured. The vibe is there. Look, I'm not looking to break up a home. But I appreciate the honesty. Instead of ending it, her acknowledgement of the truth created a strange, intimate space between us. It was a shared secret. We kept talking. The conversations grew deeper, more personal. I found myself telling her things I hadn't told anyone: my fears of being a mediocre father, my disillusionment with my career in middle management, the profound, aching silence of my marriage. She listened. She understood. With Elena, I wasn't Mark the provider or Mark the husband. I was just Mark. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough. The test was no longer theoretical. The limit I was probing was my own capacity for betrayal. The first time we met in person, I told Clara I had a late work meeting. The lie slipped out with an ease that horrified me later. We met at a small, independent bookstore with a cafe in the back. I was a nervous wreck, my palms slick with sweat. When she walked in, wearing a simple green sweater and jeans, she was more beautiful than her pictures. Her smile was warm, but her eyes held a trace of the same nervous energy I felt. We talked for 3 hours. It was just like our texts, but amplified, real. The sound of her laugh, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking, the light in her eyes when she talked about a design project she was passionate about, it was intoxicating. I felt alive. The numbness that had been my constant companion for years was melting away, replaced by a raw, electric current of feeling. "This is wrong, you know," she said softly, stirring her latte. "I know," I replied, my voice thick. "But it feels." "I know," I said again, because I did. It felt more right than anything had in a very long time. That meeting became the first of many. We were careful, paranoid. We never went to the same place twice. Our affair became a second life, a parallel universe that ran alongside my real one. In my real life, I was going through the motions, a ghost in my own home. But with Elena, I was vibrant, present. The guilt was a constant, low-grade hum in the background, but I learned to compartmentalize it. I told myself I wasn't hurting Clara because she didn't know. I told myself this was what I needed to survive, to remember what it felt like to be a man, not just a function. The test escalated. What began as emotional connection became physical. The first time I kissed Elena, in the dim light of a hotel room, it was like coming up for air after being underwater for a decade. It was passionate, desperate, and filled with a yearning so profound it shook me to my core. This was the ultimate limit, the point of no return, and I had sprinted past it without a second thought. I became a master of deception. I created fake email accounts for fictional clients. I memorized lies about conference schedules and team-building exercises. I kept a separate burner phone hidden in the glove compartment of my car. My life became a high-wire act, and part of the sick thrill was the sheer audacity of it, the skill required to maintain the fiction. I was testing my limits of cunning, of secrecy, of living a double life. But the universe has a way of reasserting balance. It was a Tuesday. I was supposed to be at a project post-mortem downtown. Instead, I was with Elena at a small art gallery she wanted to show me. We were holding hands, looking at a chaotic, beautiful splash of colors on a canvas, and she was explaining what the artist was trying to convey. In that moment, I felt a peace I hadn't known was possible. The noise in my head was quiet. And then I saw him. My son, Liam. His 8th grade class was on a field trip. He was standing across the room, his little group clustered around a docent. His eyes met mine. They widened in initial confusion, then flicked to Elena, to our joined hands, and back to me. The expression on his face, the dawning, horrifying comprehension, will be seared into my memory forever. It wasn't anger. It was a deep, profound hurt, a shattering of his world. He looked at me as if he didn't know me. He turned and disappeared into the crowd of his classmates before I could even move, before I could form a word, a lie, an explanation. The world snapped back into focus with a brutal, shattering clarity. The high wire I'd been walking on vanished, and I was in freefall. I muttered a frantic, nonsensical goodbye to Elena and practically ran out of the gallery. I called Liam's phone over and over, but it went straight to voicemail. I drove home, my heart pounding a frantic, terrified rhythm against my ribs. The comfortable numbness was gone, replaced by a searing, white-hot panic. I walked into my house, and the silence was different. It was charged, electric with pain. Clara was sitting on the sofa, her face pale and streaked with tears. Liam was beside her, his small body rigid, his face buried in his hands. Clara looked up at me, and her eyes, they weren't just sad. They were dead. "Liam told me he saw you today," she said, her voice eerily calm. "He said you were with a woman. He said you were holding her hand." There was no point in lying. The evidence was in the crushing weight of my son's silence, in the corpse of trust lying on our living room floor. "Clara, don't," she whispered, holding up a hand. "Just don't." The consequences I had so arrogantly believed I could control came crashing down with the force of a tsunami. The test was over. I had found my limit, and in the process, I had destroyed everything. The following weeks were a special kind of hell. Clara moved into the guest room. The few words we exchanged were logistical: lawyer, separation, custody. The house, once a place of quiet routine, was now a mausoleum for our family. The deepest wound, the one that bled incessantly, was Liam. He wouldn't look at me. He wouldn't speak to me. When I tried to talk to him, to explain, he would just shake his head, his jaw clenched, a miniature of a man holding in a world of pain. I had been his hero, and I had shown him that heroes are just fragile men who make catastrophic choices. I ended it with Elena in a terse, final phone call. There were no dramatics, just a weary, shared acknowledgement of the ruin we had participated in. "I'm sorry, Mark," she said, and I knew she meant it. But her words were meaningless. The damage was done. I had wanted to test my limits, to see if I was capable of feeling something, anything, again. I had succeeded beyond my wildest nightmares. I now felt everything, the searing guilt, the crushing regret, the profound grief for the life I had single-handedly obliterated. The numbness was gone, replaced by a pain so acute it was physical. My lawyer told me I had a good chance at shared custody. Clara wasn't fighting me on it, she said, for Liam's sake. But as I packed a suitcase to move into a sterile, temporary apartment, I looked at my son's closed bedroom door. Shared custody. How could I ever share anything with him again when I had broken the most fundamental share of all, trust? I had embarked on this path to discover who I really was. I found out. I was a man who could look his wife in the eye and lie. I was a man who could make his son feel unsafe in the world. I was a man who valued his own temporary euphoria over the permanent well-being of his family. The test was a catastrophic success. I learned my limit was the point at which I became the villain in my own story. And now, I am left to live in the wreckage, a king dethroned by his own hand, ruling over a kingdom of dust and silence, with only the ghost of what I had and the crushing weight of what I lost for company. The infidelity wasn't about Clara or Elena. It was about me, and the person I found at the end of that path is someone I will have to learn to live with for the rest of my life, a constant, painful reminder of the cost of testing a limit that should never have been crossed.